What's it like to advise the Minister for Finance?
It depends on what time he shows up to your house. No, I think at the time, I mean, I like him as a person. Very, very nice man. He has been struck down by something which is really tragic on a personal level. And I hope to God he gets better, right? He and I chatted over a long period of time about what was going on in the economy. I got the impression that he was a man he was a lawyer, and then he was told he had to be an economist, which is a bit like me trying to be a heart surgeon. You know, you've got to learn the tools. And he came to me and we chatted about the guarantee, and subsequently for about 6 months afterwards. And what was interesting was the sense in which Brian was very open to ideas and wasn't in any way obsessed by the top civil servants. And I thought that was a really impressive thing. And he was trying his best and he was working incredibly hard. So on a very personal level, you know, we get on very well. On a political level, I always think you should maybe keep your relations with politicians at a distance, you know, and not actually become their official advisor, because then I think that you certainly can't do the job I do if you do that. You certainly can't remain that person who wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, I wonder what we'll do today." But if I was advising him now, and I'm not, I would tell him to have the courage to let the banks simply sort out their own mess, because I think that would save us 24 billion, which is a lot of money, even for a rich country. But all told, the experience was quite pleasant.
Did he follow your advice, David?
Yeah, he did. That was the scary thing. Jesus, felt like I was only joking. Yeah, he did. On the bank guarantee, he did.
Right.
But it wasn't just my advice. I'm sure there were others talking to him. But at the time, it did seem to be. I'd written articles about it in the press and had built the case in the press, in the Indo and the Sunday Business Post. And at the time when it happened, and we spoke the next day, and I was in China coming home, I spoke to him the night before the decision, and yeah, he did take the advice. But then I think the whole thing, there was a very simple scheme, but it became compromised before it went into legislation, because a lot of things were included in the guarantee which I wouldn't have done. But then that's when you realise that, you know, these are big, powerful forces, and you're one bloke with a laptop, you know. And if you choose to live like that, which I do, which is to live, you know, working out for yourself, some of the stuff you have influence in can be taken and then turned around by, you know, a lot of the bankers who I think influenced the final piece of legislation. But he's a nice person, and I hope to God he gets better for his family. I'm not, indeed, you know, not for the country, for his family.
Yeah, please God, please God. Is Vanessa there? Oh no, yes, yourself.
You said that you thought that the bankers and the builders inspired to create the building boom. Do you think that regulators and the government were blind or stupid to this, or were they also included?
In my new book, it's a good question. In my new book, I compare it to a red light district. Okay,
which is these analogies.
Something I'm not broadly familiar with, but anyway, no. If you see what happened in Ireland, right? We created this system in Ireland, for example, and I'll come back to the question about the Irish builders. But in Ireland, we attracted in all sorts of banks into the IFSC. And what we attracted them in was with this very strange offering, which is you can do really weird stuff here, stuff you wouldn't be allowed to do at home, and you can get away with it. So we allowed lots of banks to come in here and use derivative products, this is the regulator, to build an industry, in the same way as some men go on golfing holidays to Thailand, which I'm not too sure are golfing holidays, but there you go. But I have been told...
Good golf in Thailand.
Every time I hear that, I just run away. I freak out. I've got, you know... So that's the first thing. The regulator, the government's job was to stop what was going on. And the regulator's job was to stop what was going on. But what you will find is that the regulator wasn't strong enough to stop, didn't really know what they were doing, and the government was getting 28% of the cost of every new house in taxes. So they were making a fortune from us. So when I say it was a scam, they were all four of them were involved. The regulator was being paid not as a result of, but success was being deemed how big are the Irish banks, how much money are they lending, and how many other foreign banks are in here. So it was successful for him because he was supposed to be building a business in Ireland. So he did nothing. The government was getting the money, so they did nothing. The builders were selling the houses and making a fortune, so they did nothing. And the banks and the pyramid structure under them, the mortgage brokers and all those, were making money, so they did nothing. And then when the whole thing collapsed, they just said, it's not our fault. But it was their fault. And now we've got this bill of billions and billions of euros that we can't pay. And therefore I don't think we should pay. And we should go back to the people who lent us the money and said, sorry, we've no money. And then we'll do a deal and we might pay them 20% of what we owe them. And then everyone will be not necessarily happy. But the present policy is ensuring that your generation is not an economic workforce, but a debt servicing machine. So much of your take-home wage will go in taxes, and so much of those taxes will go to pay interest on debts that my generation incurred, and that's not right. It's not fair.
Is it possible, I'm going to go on one of my Marxist tirades now, right?
It's all good. Marx is fine.
Is it possible that there has been a status quo that has been developed in this country, whereby you have a certain demographic that are extremely well off, a certain kind of grey area in the middle, this kind of middle class, and then a certain demographic of kind of a lower working class and an underclass, and that basically the guys at the top are, it is in their best interests to maintain this status quo at all costs,
absolutely.
to the detriment of the people at the bottom?
Absolutely. You've got it in one.
That's it.
That's the way Ireland runs. You know, I mean, you know, if you think about what we did in this country, you know, the Land League and all that sort of stuff, you know, we had Anglo or Protestant or English landlords, and we just replaced them with Irish landlords. We didn't replace the system. So, you know, I mean, we should be having it's not Marx that will be turning in his grave, it's Michael Davitt and Parnell. And those guys should be turning in their grave.
Okay, yeah.